Lovely. So my name's Mark Bielingmeyer. I'm a special projects coordinator with the Semel Healthy Campus Initiative Center. Um, Nickname right there is Live Well. We are a health and well-being center housed in the chancellor's office. And what we do is we work across the campus, break down these silos of groups who are trying to achieve similar goals in the health and well-being arena on campus, different services, programs, and we facilitate working groups that specialize in different areas of health to get them together and to try and work collaboratively on projects to ultimately make the campus the healthiest in the nation, the healthiest place for students, staff, faculty to live, work, play, all that good stuff. And so I had a presentation here. About Semel HCI, but I thought maybe it would be fun to explore doing just a screen share and me guiding you through the website, which might be more practical and hands-on for you to find in that information. I'll also do a demo on gardening, and I just have it as an intro to urban gardening. And so if there's any specific topics that you want me to dive deeper in, or on the other end of that, just cruise through, feel free to just drop something in the chat. You're more than welcome to turn on your mic, and looks like we have a few groups of folks here, and so we can make this more interactive. And so this is our healthy.ucla website, and I just wanted to do a screen share. I had a presentation, but I thought this might be a little more interactive and practical for you to find the information for yourselves. And just a little bit about Semel HCI. Our vision is to make UCLA the healthiest community to work, learn, and thrive, and to inspire those to apply the information and resources that we have here to their communities, and to help support that effort as well. And you may have heard of the Semel Institute, which is somewhat related to the Healthy Campus Initiative Center, the Semel family being that connective tissue there. And so they were involved, maybe about 8 years ago, 2012, I believe, is when the beginnings of the HCI started. And so they had donated money to create the Semel Institute, but wanted to do something outside of brain and behavior, something more public health related that impacted the healthy living of campus. And so with the chancellor, they created the Semel HCI, and with the intent to create this culture of health, to highlight, I should say, this culture of health on our campus. And so a few things that we do is we support enhancement and expansion of current health and well-being efforts. We explore innovative approaches to exercise, mental health, nutrition, social well-being, try and foster these synergies between departments across campus to try and elevate their work by having it be something shared and put together through collective impact, and to create a participatory way for students to get involved. And so what we do is we have these thematic pods, and I'm just going to scroll up here at the top. And so these pods are basically working groups. They have a faculty and a staff leader. So for example, our Eat Well pod, they focus on nutrition, and they have a faculty member in, I believe, evolutionary biology, Dr. Amy Roat, and then the associate vice chancellor of housing and hospitality, who does all the food and dining on the Hill, amongst other things. And so these pods meet once a month, and they're open to everyone, and they share resources, updates, and opportunities where people can work together for a project. And so one of these examples is our community garden, which I'll get to in a bit, but just let you know, there are the built environment. That's more about how our environment affects our health and sustainability. Engage Well is our social health, Mind Well. But our garden was a project that was with UCLA Recreation, Semel HCI, the Green Initiative Fund, which is through sustainability, and we've worked with the CPO to create kind of a basic needs resource for people to grow their own food. And this was something that kind of touched points on all these different pods, and it was a really great project. We also worked with the DIG student group, which I'll talk about in a minute. But essentially, this is a resource we wanted to offer you information on, because each year we offer an application where you can adopt plots. And so I did a little freeze frame here of the garden there. So that's a little air shot of it. And yeah, each year groups of at least 5 people, students, staff, faculty, can adopt a raised bed in Sunset Rec to grow their own food. We have workshops that we offer, and just different opportunities to build community, stimulate discussions around food security. And we grow food. Right now the campus is closed, and so the garden has been we're converting it into this farm model where we're just planting out the beds ourselves and donating everything to UA South at the University Village Apartments. And so you can keep in touch at our Instagram at HCI Gardens. We have different content we have there, grow tips, potholder spotlights, different ways to keep engaged. But another thing you can do to stay informed on gardening on campus is get involved with the DIG student group. And so they have weekly workshops, and they are an undergraduate group that also has graduate students, even staff that sometimes get involved. And so if you go to their calendar, you can see all their different workshops. We usually do workshops too, but we're spending a little bit more of our attention towards planting this 30 raised bed and small fruit tree orchard. And so they're really taking the leadership on campus of educating the community in a more interactive way. I have time to do this today for you all, but it's kind of more of a one-off event. And so I encourage you to look at those resources. And then the Master Gardening Program we've worked with in the past. And one opportunity that they have is these Grow LA Victory Garden Initiative classes, where you can participate in up to 4 classes and get a certificate. We did one at UCLA last spring, really successful. We're going to be posting the YouTube videos of some of our victory gardeners, if you will, some of what they learned and demonstrating some skills. But you can go here to learn more about these online classes. It looks like a lot of them are full, but you never know. You can email them. Hopefully we'll be bringing this back to you in the spring. And so last thing I'll say here is I have just one opportunity. If you are a student group, we do have, oops, looks like my screen got paused. If you are a student group, let's see here. Sorry, let me just redo my screen share. If you are a student group on campus, we offer funding. And sorry, I'm having a little trouble finding it. There we go. And so you have to be a sole registered group. You can earn up to $2,500. And if you work on a project that's relating to any one of these different themes of health, specifically through an overarching theme of health equity is what we're focusing on this year. So if you have questions on this, we just had an information session, but you can email me more to learn more about this. And really great opportunity. DIG was a group that got involved last year. The Public Health Nutrition Club got involved. That's a grad student group to work on a project called Feast, which is bringing food demos and food access to the graduate students. And so with that, I know it's already 12:23, and so I want to be mindful about this activity that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to just excuse myself and start walking out the door here so we can get this demo going. The goal here is to kind of bring this information to you, since we can't get it to you by our normal means of our community garden. And so I'm just going to talk about the very basics to kind of a backyard setup, but I would love to also talk about some of the more larger operations, like growing in a raised bed or other things like that. But I'll talk a little bit about tools, getting up the right environment for your garden, like sun and other things you need to be aware of to grow in your space. Seeds, what do you want to grow and why? When it's good to start from seed versus growing from a transplant. I'm going to do a little demo on how to start the seeds and talk about the differences between these little containers you can grow. We'll do a little bit on soil, and I can take that to a very large scale with composting. And then I'll show you a little bit about what I'm growing and some little tricks and tips, as well as little insights on how to deal with pests. And so over there in that bucket, I have a compost tea setup that I can teach you about. And then yeah, that's kind of where I was hoping to go. So, before you garden, you want to have the right tools. And so what I have here are some hand shears. That's basically for pruning and cutting off dead, diseased, disorderly parts of your plant. A lot of different purposes you can do for that, but really just to cut away different parts of your plant. It's really good for tomatoes. Tomatoes love to be pruned, in my experience. It helps them grow, and because when plants get real dense and have a lot of foliage, they actually get a little, dark inside. Not a lot of light penetrates. It stays damp if there's not a lot of wind, and that can lead to fungus and pests. So it's good to kind of keep an open airflow and canopy. These are different hand tools. We have a shovel, and this is kind of like a hand trowel, or a way to it's hand cultivar to like kind of graze the soil to, if it's clumped up, you might need to fluff it up so that it helps with the root growth. Some gloves. Some people, don't like getting their hands dirty. That's cool. I love getting my hands dirty. I think it's kind of healthy actually to get your hands in some real nice soil. There's actually some research out there that says that there are microbes and different molecules in the soil that's healthy for your lungs, and even actually for your mental health. It's I've heard antidepressants, serotonin releasing chemicals or something. Can't be quoted on that specifically, but definitely worth a Google search, which will help boost your mood. So one thing you want to think about is what kind of space you have. So I'm running this is actually a little converted garage that I'm renting with my partner, and she and I do we make use of this little space, and so we're lucky to have this little outdoor patio kind of hallway. And so what is the light? I keep pointing this up into the screen, not to blind you, but to kind of see what this environment is. I have a giant jacaranda tree, beautiful tree, but it covers up a lot of our growing potential. It's a southward facing wall. And so if you can see, this will be the path of the sun. You always want to see what the path of the sun is. And so it kind of comes over and sets over there in the west towards the ocean. Luckily, I have this southward facing wall, and there is light that can even bounce off this white wall, so it can get a little bit of stuff over on the other side. But knowing what kind of sunlight you have dictates what you can grow. In California, we have what we call a cool season and a warm season. We don't have a freezing winter. And so you can kind of grow year round, but there are certain things you should grow during the year, as opposed to some things you shouldn't grow during the year. And so I have a little collection here. I have some chard, some beets, some carrots. Here's some peppers. I'm just going to do a little light organization of stuff depending on the season. Tomatoes, green basil, acorn squash, eggplant, radish. That looks like some daikon. And so basically in the cool season, that is like spring, late spring, or late fall to early spring. That kind of is the cool season. The sun is lowest in the sky and compared to summer. And so there's not a lot of energy, and energy and heat is what gives that extra oomph to your plants, to like your tomatoes. So in the winter, the cool season, we are growing our roots, our stems, our leaves, stuff that doesn't require a lot of energy to output. In the summer, the sun is very high in the sky, and you're growing things that fruit. So your nightshade family, that would be your eggplant, pepper, tomato, all of your gourds and squashes, zucchini, winter and summer squash. Winter and summer squash kind of confuses people. One isn't grown during one season and one isn't grown the other. They're both grown when the sun is high in the sky in the summer, but a winter squash is a hard rind, or external squash. It has this hard cover which is able for you to store it over the winter over a long period of time. Summer squash is like your zucchini, which has a very thin flesh and you need to eat right away. And so right now we're going to be focusing on these root vegetables, leafy greens. I don't see many leafy greens in my seed pack starts right now. But we do have the Swiss chard, which is a a prosperous, healthy leafy green. You can pick it and pick it and pick it and pick it, and it replenishes itself. So yeah, your leafy greens, your root vegetables, but also your brassica families, your brassica family. And so I have that right there. Don't mind the Japanese stuff. I like to shop around for different seeds in different places to just explore and experiment, because that's kind of a real big thing for me personally. It's not just to, be more self-sustaining and have more of a readily access to my food, that kind of food security effort, but it's also about having fun, experimenting, the mental health effects affiliated with it, the community, and the art behind it, to just grow and have fun growing a myriad of plants. So the brassica family is cauliflower, which you see here. This is a type of cauliflower. It's called Romanesco. Broccoli. I had another one that people don't really know too much about. That's Kohlrabi. That's basically like a stem. It looks like a beet, but the root is actually right there. And so the stem, what you're eating is this inflamed stem, kind of like a jicama, I guess. Kale, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. That's all in the brassica family. We grow that. And so I'll do a little seed starting demo, and I'll do a little bit of this kohlrabi. I think that'd be kind of a fun one to do. And so, after that, you really need to know what your containers are. So let me try and see if I can get this a little bit better of a view for you all here. Any questions? I know I'm kind of cruising and talking a lot here, but I want to just make sure I'm okay. I don't see any questions. Y'all can still hear me, right? Someone give me a thumbs up on that.
You're good.
Okay, wonderful. And I know I'm cruising fast, but please do. I want this to be interactive. So if you have anything, feel free to give me a shout. So once you know what you're growing, you got to understand what kind of container you might need. So a raised bed is something that is typically at least, 4 foot by 4 foot. I don't have any here, but it's inside the ground. Sometimes it's right on top. You can put it right on top of something that's concrete or impermeable surface. That has a lot of benefits to it. It's easier to control the soil qualities. It might drain quicker. It might, because it has the sun hitting the side of the walls of it. It's more accessible. You don't have to kind of bend down to get to it. Easily to control weeds. In-ground beds are nice because you've got that full connection to just the earth, straight, direct connection to the earth, the microbes that exist in there, all the different biology, all the different types of critters, the worms, the arthropods, all those goodies. And so there's different setups, but the container is kind of good for this kind of urban gardening setup. And so you'll see I have a few different types here. If you're starting out your seeds, there's little 4-inch containers, which are pretty good. They're kind of easy because they can bend a little bit, so it's easier to get them out when you're trying to do that. Here's a compostable. I think this is like a 2 or 3 inch. I'm not really a fan of the compostable, to be honest. When I'm transplanting a plant, I want the roots to not be restricted or bound in any way. And I'll demonstrate that in a little bit with that plant. But I feel like the roots will grow faster than this will decompose, essentially. And so if I transplant this into the ground, it'll take a while for it to decompose. That's my own personal experience. Maybe you all have had better experiences with these, but at least this one has a little drainage hole, which is really good because you want that water to drain. You don't want the roots to be sitting in water. That will promote molds and funguses. That's why this one isn't really very good. It's just kind of cute. It doesn't have a hole. So you might put like a succulent in here maybe that doesn't need a lot of water. But if you're transplanting something, you really want to have a hole at the bottom for drainage. Other things that you can grow, this is a Terra Cotta pot. This is basically a permeable type of clay, I believe. And it's really good because it breathes a little bit and water won't sit into it. I like to put a dish underneath. I'll get to that in a little bit. These kind of restrict the roots, and it's real important to have something with a hole if you're growing in a container, or if you're transplanting, because you don't want the roots to get moldy or fungus stuck in there. Terra Cotta pots are good. They're a little more breathable. They have kind of a permeable clay to them, and so they drain a little bit better. I like to put a little pot underneath mine and water into the dish. And so if you are starting from seed, I can do a little demo with that in a second, but I'm just gonna hook up my camera here to this stand and show you a little bit about this. You can also buy from the store, if you're buying a transplant you can buy a six pack of already started plants, which is great, but you always want to check the roots because a lot of these plants typically they have them in there a little too long and the roots need more food, and so the only reason why they're living in there for so long is because they have all this fertilizer to keep them alive and to keep the plant fed. And so I'm just going to show you right here. I'm going to take this out. This is what we call a root bound plant. And so if you're going to buy from a nursery, make sure that it is not root bound. This isn't very healthy for a plant. It's going to be very stressed when you transplant it. The roots are going to kind of be locked into each other, and so they're not really going to want to explore and strengthen themselves by building themselves out more. That's why starting from seed is typically the best way to go about it. And so what I'm going to demo here is a little bit about starting your seeds and different types of soil you can do, because I think starting seeds is best. This is just a potting mix from a nursery near me. It's an organic mix. It basically just has a real balanced list of ingredients in there that is good for potting in a potted container. It seems to be sustainable, 100% natural and organic. I'm eating this stuff, so I want to try if I can have the resource to buy something that's a little bit safer. Basically, it's just a balanced mix. And I don't know if it says specifically on here, but nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, you'll see that listed on some mixes. It's basically a simple foundation of nutrients in different soil mixes. I can show you a container over here, which has a better example of that. This is a fertilizer, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but you can see it has those numbers on there. 645, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, NPK. And so this is a balanced fertilizer, and that's why it's a kind of a 6-4-5 ratio. If you want to start your own soil, you can totally do that too. And so what I have here is I collect my food scraps, and I have a worm bin. That's kind of a nice trick tip to urban gardening. If you can build a compost pile in a backyard space, I recommend you do that. You should check out LA Compost. They have a network of compost hubs all around the city where community can just drop off their compost in a thermophilic pile. It's basically it uses heat, aeration, churning it every other day or so to break down food into soil. And so there's two major components. You have your nitrogen, which is your fresh plant waste, bananas. I got tomatoes in here, avocado. And then your carbon is what you balance it with. And that's stuff like dead plant waste. This is like an old onion, leaves, sawdust, newspaper. So that's kind of like the fundamental blocks of composting. I don't want to go too into detail on that because that's not necessarily what this workshop's all about. But I feed my worms a very specific diet. My red wigglers, I keep them in a small container that kind of looks like this right here. It's called a vertical migration worm bin. And basically it has different chambers. If you go on our Instagram, HCI Gardens, you can actually see a workshop of me doing a demo with our worm bin. But yeah, you can keep that in your backyard. You can keep it inside your house. I know people who keep it underneath their sink. And you can grow your own food that way. Or I'm sorry, grow your own soil. The worms eat it all up. It creates this worm casting poop, which is just extraordinarily nutritious, and it's free. You're creating a resource from waste. Basically a profit from something that would go to the trash. And diverting it from the landfill, which is good for communities. It's good for the earth. So that's a whole nother side tangent. When you're starting seeds though, or you have like a potted plant that you're starting seeds in, it's not necessarily ideal to plant directly in compost. It's actually good to have a soil mix that doesn't have so much biology in it, because there could be things living in that plant or that soil that could hinder the germination rate of seeds. It kind of sounds counterintuitive because it's such a natural process for seeds to go into dirt, but that's kind of what some of the research shows. And so having things to make your own seed mix can be beneficial. This is a Coco Coir. This is basically a sustainable alternative to peat moss. Peat moss is basically just an organic substrate, a medium to grow plants in. It's not really touted as something sustainable these days, because peat comes from a peat moss bog, which is an environment, an ecosystem that is stressed right now. Mostly in Canada is where we grab it, I believe. But Coco Coir is really good. These are the fiber husks. You can buy these and soak them. It's really good for your worm bed as well. But you can fluff this out and make a soil mix out of it. You kind of add this. I'm going to take some of this stuff away, just so I can get into this little soil demo. But you basically mix, that together with, you can do a little bit of compost just to have some nutrients in there. You got to have some nutrients. But this is a little bit of soil I grabbed from that bag. Sorry if I'm shaking a little bit. I think this is a good time for me to switch to a little bit farther back. Is this a little bit better for everyone? Hopefully it is. So in here is just that soil mix I had.
Yeah, looks good.
Looks good? Great. And then in here is what you kind of want to mix in. It's kind of hard to see. This is plastic. No, I'm just playing. This isn't plastic. It looks like plastic. This is perlite. It looks like little pieces of styrofoam, but it's actually a type of mineral or rock that is baked, and it pops a little bit. And it's basically good for aeration and drainage. It creates a little bit of space in the soil to help with your root growth. So I just toss it in there. If you look into a bag of soil, this one already had a little bit of it, but I like to add a little bit more of it, just because it helps with that root development. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix this in a little bit, like such. Flip it around here again. And so this is kind of like a better soil mix that I'd like to start my seeds in. And so I'm going to add this. I'm going to move this over here. Hopefully we'll have some time for just some Q&A as well at the end here. Let's see here. I think y'all should be able to see that pretty good. Let's see if I can make this a little bit better. Okay. I think that works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my 6-pack right here. One thing to do is make sure that your soil mix is moist, because dry soil mix, I have some water here I'm going to add in. Dry soil mix will actually condense when you water it, which is good. Which is bad. You don't want your soil mix to collapse in your container, because it will shrink the amount of space your plant has to grow. The reason why that's pretty bad, normally I would be more interactive with you all, asking for why you think it's bad. You can do that if you want in the chat, but for sake of time, I'm just going to cruise through. Is because it limits the amount of time that seedling can be in there. You want to prolong the amount of, not an exorbitant amount, but you want to have a good amount of time for your plant to grow and get healthy and strong through that immature phase of the plant, where its roots are very weak, and you want to wait till it has that established root system, so that when you transplant it, it's a little bit healthier. So if you don't pre-water your soil mix, it might condense down a little bit. You'll lose a little bit of that growing space, right? It's because you have, what is this, like 3 inches maybe here? right? And so if you fill this with dry soil mix and then you water it, it might shrink because the whole thing will collapse with the water. It'll just kind of keep down. And you can't keep this in as long. But if you have it pre-mixed and you add it to the top, it should be good. So I'm just going to do is I'm going to grab this soil. I'm going to add it in like this. I'm going to fill them in about like a quarter, a third, maybe even halfway full. And what I like to do is I kind of get my fingers here and I just kind of pat it down a little bit because I don't want that airspace, like I said earlier. I'm not going to do this too much because I don't want this to be too condensed. This is a problem with clay soil. So I guess this is more towards Richard. If you're trying to grow food in a, at a farm level or a backyard or a large backyard, you don't want a lot of clay soil because it's too, there's no aeration. It's not really good for root development. It might be good for some plants, but starting seeds is not always the best to have a very collapsed, compact soil. It doesn't help with drainage. It's good to have these little channels for roots to go through and little bugs and whatnot, worms. So once, like when I'm about halfway full, I'm gonna add just another layer of that on here. Let's see, how am I doing for time? 12:48. So I'm gonna cruise through here. I'm gonna get that to, basically about pretty full, a pretty full level. I'm gonna place that down. I'm gonna take my seeds. You can read the back of your seed packets. I don't know if you can quite see that. It has a lot of information all the way from when to start it, when to plant it, how much sun it needs, how far you need to seed them and sow them apart if you're planting them, the germination rate, how to harvest. So a lot of good stuff. I recommend you doing that. Always read up beforehand. I'm gonna open up this seed packet and see what we got here inside. I usually always will pour it into my hand. If I have dirty hands, it's not always the best because if you put your dirty hands inside a seed bag that you don't use all the seeds, you'll get some dirt in there and it's might spark germination. It's a little bit hard to see, but they're like the size of a not even as big as a peppercorn. It's like a couple millimeters. And so the rule of thumb is when you're starting seeds, I'm gonna flip this up so you all can see. When you're planting seeds, the depth of the seed should be roughly about 2 to 3 times the size of the seed. That's just a general rule of thumb that we do. And something like this, I'm just gonna actually like sprinkle it on the top. Some people poke a little hole and then they put the seed in there. That works too. You can move around with your finger a little bit and then cover it up. So this is like basically just on the surface. That's another good reason why you want to start seeds in a container like this, because you can control it way easier, right? Wind, rain, bugs, it's not going to get to it. If you put this on your windowsill, you can more easily control it. Just cover that up. You never want to put more than one seed in a hole. People make that mistake. You're just gonna have plants that are overcrowded if they all germinate, and then you have to make a decision on which one to cut. Some people don't cut their plants, and then the roots bind together. You can get plants that can, endure that, but it's not really the best setup. If you go to like a Trader Joe's and buy a basil plant, they have like 15 basil plants inside the whole pot, and it's just not really the best. You might be able to transplant them out if you're careful, but it will hurt the roots. So I like to just thin them out. You basically just cut them from the top because you don't want to disturb the roots. I'm just doing like a 1 seed in each corner here. Because if they do all germinate, I might be able to carefully move them apart and transplant them in separate ways. So I'm gonna leave that there. You want to have 1 seed per hole. You can maybe have a few different seed holes, in one little square like this, but you don't want to put too many in one because if they all germinate, they're all going to compete with each other. You got to cut them down. So I just do 1 seed per hole and maybe just 2 or 3 seeds per little cell here. So I'm going to keep that. I'm going to try and actually just hold this from now on. So I'm going to keep this inside and I'm going to just monitor it as best I can over the next couple weeks and hope that it germinates. I read the seed packet, says it's going to germinate in a couple days. I'm sorry, I think 5 to 8 days. I'm gonna just mist the top of this one more time. I don't want to disturb it too much. It's important not to disturb it moving, in the days ahead. I can kind of disturb it if I wanted to right now by pouring water in here just because they haven't germinated yet. But the seedling mix is already pre-moistened. I'm adding a little bit of water here. One thing you can do is keep this by your windowsill. Put a dish. You can put it on a dish like this. This is an example here. And you can just actually water this dish. And so what happens there is if you water in the dish, the capillary properties of water will wick that water up and moisten the soil and bring it up to the top. So that way you're not disturbing the seeds that might have little root hairs that are trying to, stay secure and not be disturbed. So last thing you want to do is just you get a little piece of tape, and I have a little stick here, and you basically put that in a corner and you just write what the plant is and the date in which you planted it. I have some tape here on this one. It's an old one I repurposed. You just gotta clean these out every time you do them with a little bit of bleach. And so that's kind of starting your seeds. In a few weeks, you might be able to transplant it. What I have here is another type of container. I have some beans and some broccoli, and they're getting attacked by spider mites. I think I might have lost my, let's see here. Hopefully now you can see my video. It lost it for a sec. Yeah, the heat really affected my plants. I was out for the weekend. The spider mites got to it. But you can see I do have a little bit of a bean crop right there. Always good to pick these as frequently as possible because the more you pick them, the more they'll proliferate. The broccoli I think is getting stressed out the most because it's really hot right now. They don't really like these heat waves that keep coming, and so caterpillar came and started munching on that. Which that type of problem has to do with a little bit of the soil health, I think, and how you maintain the plant. So it's good to, if you're growing in a container, to have some sort of fertilizer. This is an organic, all-purpose fertilizer. You can also use compost, but the soil health really indicates your plant health. The pest is a symptom of something that's underlying. That's what I tend to believe. And so you can pick those worms off. You can spray them down with water every morning, I've heard. You can also make a little combination of garlic, chili, pepper, oil, and the bugs don't like that. You can make Dr. Bronner's and spray it on the plant. Here's a little Thai chili. This is actually thriving really well in this heat. And what I can do is I can actually use these chilies and make some of that little bit of that little pest control. But you've got a little bug right there. I'm not sure if you can see these, but beautiful Thai chili plant. Once again, peppers you want to pick very often so that they continue to fruit and produce. I have a papaya that I got from the Buy Nothing Club. If you're not on Buy Nothing, it's like a Facebook group where they just give away free stuff to support kind of a closed loop economy, which is pretty cool. That's I got a mango tree from them. The composting approach is also really fun to growing because you get these volunteer plants. And this is an avocado I got from something I ate. I don't know if it'll actually produce fruit. You can never really tell until your fruit gets to maturity, but you can cut and graft different pieces of fruit trees together, which is a whole nother scientific experiment and topic. But a lot of fun. I have this outside, so I have a Terra Cotta Pot. If you're going inside, you might want to put something plastic because that is permeable and it will get water on the ground. You can also grow in a container like this, which is really fun. I have my good friend Gumby, who's just a good omen here for this plant. So all different types of containers, you can get creative with it. And that's kind of the basics to like an at-home grow setup. If you're interested in compost tea, you could actually make your own fertilizer at the cost of really nothing. And you basically brew the microbes in your soil using a fish pump. you can do this at a very large scale too. Richard, I recommend checking this out. This is amazing for the garden. I got a fish pump from the store and I fill a bag of compost with it. Inside here is some molasses. It's a sugar for food. And I basically get purified water, filtered water, because tap water has chlorine and chloride in it and will kill microbes. Let that aerate for a couple days, stick in my compost, let it brew, and I got a huge nutritious tea to just pour in the soil and on plants as an anti-pest, control measure. Basically inoculates microbes in your plants. So that was a lot in a short amount of time. We had some technical difficulties, which I apologize about. I hope y'all can understand this digital world that it's not perfect. I wish I was in the garden. But yeah, we have a few minutes. I can also stay on a little bit later. I'm not in a rush. But if anyone has any questions about growing, I can share my knowledge. Keep in touch through email. If you have any questions, go on a dig workshop, a master gardener workshop, apply for a student grant, follow us on Instagram, HCI Gardens, send me an email if you have any questions. We have jobs for GSRs, graduate student researchers. So if you're interested in that, send me an email. Our Engage Well Pod, which does social health, is looking for a GSR. And our Research Well Pod might be looking for one to work on basically an online platform for project optimization. So we do have those opportunities. Send me an email. I see a question from Richard. How pure does the water need to be, distilled or just filtered? Filtered is fine. You actually can fill it up with a hose water or the sink water and let it sit for a day or two, and that chloride will evaporate out of the water actually. And you put that fish bubbler in. I have a solar powered one, but you can also do one in that's plugged into a wall, and you let it brew. Teeming with Microbes is an amazing book that I recommend looking at. Thank you. I was just about to put that in the chat again. But yeah, Teeming with Microbes. Elaine Ingham is an incredible soil scientist she wrote a book with some other people on the amazing properties of soil. And you can learn a lot about optimizing plants there.